For decades, the tech industry has repeated a mantra when systems fail: garbage in, garbage out. But cleaning the data doesn't fix the core issue. The real problem is fragments in, fragments out. We feed our most advanced systems isolated shards of reality, and they return outputs optimized exclusively for those shards, completely blind to the rest of the system. To manage the modern world's complexity, we compress systems into isolated abstractions. A person becomes a patient ID, a river becomes a compliance checkbox, a community becomes a demographic node. Historically, reducing the world to data points was required to build functional institutions, but we built a global architecture that forgot the abstraction is not the actual thing. A person is not their census tract, yet our entire technological infrastructure treats them as if they are. This reduction splits reality into disconnected ledgers. You're a worker here, a patient there. They never communicate. A regional utility is forced to prioritize grid efficiency using isolated load data, completely blind to downstream watershed stress or the school funding gap next door. Attach AI to these unlinked systems, and it does exactly what it is programmed to do. It ruthlessly optimizes for the fragment it is fed, externalizing massive costs to the unseen communities and ecosystems it cannot perceive. This systemic destruction occurs regardless of the intentions of the developers. It is a structural inevitability. A system simply cannot optimize for what it cannot see. If fragmentation is the root cause of these failures, the obvious question is why we don't simply connect every database together into a single massive pool. The answer is sovereign data walls. Institutions legally and competitively cannot share proprietary, sensitive, or liability-laden information. A hospital cannot surrender private patient records, and a power grid cannot expose its competitive load data. Right now, the tech industry is attempting a brute force approach to this barrier. They are building larger AI models and faster computing infrastructure, hoping scale will solve the problem. But all of that computational power violently bounces right off these necessary walls. No amount of compute can infer realities that are permanently hidden. You cannot train a model to reconstruct a reality it is legally prohibited from seeing. We are trapped in a standoff. We have a civilizational need to see the interconnected whole, paralyzed by the absolute, non-negotiable requirement of sovereign data privacy. The architecture designed to break this standoff is called the Federation. To understand it, we have to look at what it isn't. The Federation is not a central database. It doesn't aggregate information, and it absolutely does not ask entities to surrender their proprietary data. Instead, its true function is a reconciliation layer. It operates entirely above the existing data silos, without breaching the walls below. Through this layer, the utility company keeps its raw, proprietary load forecasts securely locked behind its own walls. The sensitive data never leaves its origin. But both the utility and the neighboring school district project a single, mathematically verified data point up to the network. This is called an attested truth. An attested truth is a piece of data that has been cryptographically proven accurate at its source, without revealing the underlying raw context. Entities do not have to share what they hold behind sovereign walls. They only have to make specific, verified truths visible to the commons. This animated diagram shows how the utility scenario functions with the new reconciliation layer active. The previously disconnected ledgers for the grid, the watershed, and the school district overlap perfectly to map the actual environment. The system can now simultaneously read the grid load, measure the downstream watershed stress, and register local workforce needs. Every party maintains strict privacy, yet the whole picture becomes visible. As a result, the AI's objective function shifts. An objective function is the mathematical formula an AI uses to determine its goal and measure its success. The AI now optimizes its actions against this unified, holistic wireframe instead of an isolated fragment. Autonomous agents stop acting like wrecking balls. They stop externalizing costs to future generations because the relationships and obligations between these systems are no longer invisible to the math. We pay a massive fragmentation tax every day, not because raw data is hidden, but because attested truth is entirely invisible. The future of intelligent technology requires shifting our focus. We do not need to share more data. We need to see more truth. A federated reconciliation layer is the strict, required ground truth for any AI built to serve humanity.